can I move? No, can I need to, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Director General Sanginga. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see if I can take the first 5 minutes to speak without my script, because today has been much larger than I had imagined. The debate that we saw earlier today actually has literally said everything I will be saying today. And it's very gratifying to see a younger generation already speaking with authority and passion, even in things they don't believe in. As I understand correctly, you assign them these topics and ask them to defend their positions. If I had to cast my vote, I would have cast my vote with both cards, because you need producers as well as processors. You need women as well as investors and as producers, as well as men, as business persons, people and producers, and every other thing. My wife needs me just as much as I need her. Correct? You can't say no. It's a great pleasure to be here again. You've offered me an opportunity, a platform, a tool. I couldn't say no to you, for sure. It is fantastic, really, to be able to come back to IITA whenever I do, and to relive moments of my younger days. I think the only person that probably knows me longer than anyone else is Steve Lawani, who was the chief librarian, I guess, librarian at IITA when I joined. I think you knew, my wife knew me before you, but she wasn't my wife then. Yeah, indeed, Sanginga, our paths seem to have followed the same, or our lives have followed the same path, or similar paths, let me say, over time. You were a student at IITA doing your research, I believe. And to some extent, I was a student, kind of a student, post-bachelor's. I'll come to that in a minute. So as I said, there's a lot of pleasure and actually gratitude to be here. And it's also an honor for me to be initiating the celebration of your 50th anniversary, which is next year. And there's much for IITA to be proud of. Your research alone into roots and tubers, and bananas and plantains, maize, other crops, beans. Your IPM strategies, farming systems, IPM, billybug control, biocontrol, integrated rural resources management, and of course now climate change, helping to build resilience of millions of small producers in Africa. I think it would be modest to claim that the work that you have done over these 50 years have resulted in fewer children, fewer women, and fewer men going to bed hungry in Africa. And of course, the work that we are doing together, IITA and IFAD, is also helping to grow a future generation of agripreneurs. IITA holds a special place in my heart, and I'll explain to you why. I became associated with IITA when this institute was only 5 years old, in 1971. When I finished my bachelor's at the University of Ibadan, I was allowed to work here as a temporary technical field assistant for 3 months. Then it was renewed again for another 3 months, so 6 months, on a daily paid basis. So when I didn't come to work, I wasn't paid. So I was really temporary. Then I came back in '76, again, not by chance, maybe by happenstance. I came back as a postdoc with, I believe it was SK Singh or SB Singh or so. IITA was barely 10 years old at the time. But I think what is significant, because you mentioned it, what you see on the screen, the IITA offered me the first professional experience, because after 10 months as a postdoc in '76, I was outposted to Zaire, a little village, Nwanze, research station, as a first outposted field entomologist to work on the cassava mealybug that you just mentioned. In this picture, that's me on the left, over there, with the big afro. You won't believe that is me, would you? And then next to me is Professor Odiambo at the time, who was at that time board chair. He was at the time director of ISEPE. And then Bill Gamble, that you mentioned, Bill Gamble, who recruited me as a postdoc. And then Klaus Leuschner, who was also the roots and tuber entomologist here. And of course, to the right is the other African, is Humphrey Ezuma, who was our team leader in Zaire. Now for me, it's a very, and I tell you this is interesting because I only took this picture last year when I went to Nwanze. It was hanging on the wall next to the office I used to occupy. Nothing had changed. Kinshasa was transformed. I could not recognize myself in Kinshasa. But Nwanze remained as it was. Time stopped. And this picture was on the wall, and thanks to modern technology, my iPhone was able to record it. I couldn't believe it. But things have happened since then. So in a very real sense, coming to IITA is coming home. Not necessarily Nigeria. Coming to IITA is coming home. And that means a lot to me. And I'm delighted that we're talking about agriculture for the benefit of younger people at the very institution that gave me my start as a young professional. Now, when I came in 2012, as you mentioned, and I challenged the young youth corpers at that time, I did not know how much would grow from that challenge. But thanks to your leadership, DG Zanginga, and your team today, IITA is a bastion. It's almost like an incubator for youth entrepreneurs that grew out and blossomed. And as you mentioned, 37 countries. But I know the last time we spoke, or at least we were together, you spoke about initiatives across Africa, Congo, DRC, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and some others. I'm really impressed, and I'm immensely encouraged. Congratulations. The hopes and dreams of our continent is in the hands of young people. They are Africa's greatest asset, greatest untapped resource. It is the responsibility of Africa's elders, those of us who have been fortunate in life to have lived a full and successful life as professionals. We have the responsibility of developing outlets for your energy, for your creativity, and for your unique initiatives that you must take for you to meet your potential. As some of you know, just last month, I received the first or the inaugural Africa Food Prize for being outspoken and dedicated to smallholder producers, to agriculture by small producers, and to my belief that agriculture, irrespective of the size, of the scale, is a business. It's an economic activity. Whether you are primary producers or secondary producers along the value of the food value chain, whether you are processing, you need produce to process. Whether you are producing, you need processors to add value to your produce. It's a partnership. If it's a dynamic partnership, it's a win-win. It's actually a win-win-win situation for producers, for processors, and for consumers. If it works, you have to build a better and brighter future for Africa. And I'll tell you why. My generation has a lot to be accountable for. We have failed woefully as Africans, my generation. No, let me put it differently. We have succeeded. We have succeeded in one thing: consistently failure. We have succeeded very well in failing. Why do I say that? Our independence fighters handed over to us a land that is rich with resources, minerals, diamond, gold, copper, bauxite, you name it, oil and gas, extractive industries, but also a land that is plentiful, rich farmland, rainfall in abundance, and plenty of sunshine. No other continent in the world is so gifted. What did we do with it? Squandered it. For me, the statement is very clear and it is simple. My generation has failed in the use of these resources. But having done that, we have a responsibility, definitely, not to destroy the future of our future generations. And so those of us like myself who have been abundantly blessed, we must stand firm in our convictions for the younger generations so that they can climb on the ladder of our shoulders, of our backs. They have to be able to climb on the ladder of our backs and stand on the pinnacle of our shoulders so they can see beyond our own vision. They can see into the future, filled with hope. The average African doesn't do that. He pulls down the younger generation. PhD, we all have it. Pull him or her down. But it's only in holding to hope. If you do not have hope, young people do not have hope, how can they change the world? What will they work for? Hopelessness and frustration erodes the spirit of the will to live and survive and leads to desperation, violence, and destruction. It's as simple as that. When you have no hope, what is there to lose? Now let me be clear also. When I talk about investment, I don't mean investment only in our young men. Africa will never achieve its potential unless we provide the same opportunities for our young women as we do to our young boys. They must not be treated as machines for motherhood. They must be given the same opportunities, and if necessary, more than we give to boys. The same rights, the same opportunities as our sons. Why do I say this? Contrary to what you will have expected me to say in one of the debates or the questions, in the last 40 years, I have learned one thing, at least in my profession, and amongst rural populations. Amongst the rural population that we work with all over the world, when you invest in a rural man, you invest in an individual. When you invest in a woman, you invest in a community. Our continent is young. Actually, we are the youngest continent in the world. Going by age, 60% of our population is younger than 30. 60%. So for every 10 of us here, 6 of you are younger than 30, and perhaps even less. So let me share with you some of my perspectives on how we can plant the seeds for Africa's future by investing in youth. The reason why I'm not being specific on Nigeria is because I do not know Nigeria. It's been 40 years since I lived in this country, and the longest was 10 months here at IITA as a postdoc in '76. So I will not claim to be an expert on my own country, but I can claim to be knowledgeable about Africa and the rest of the world. Some people have described Africa's youth as the youth bulge. At IFAD, we describe them as the demographic dividend, Africa's demographic dividend. As I said, no other region in the world can match Africa's unbiased, unabated population growth. And of course, no other part of the world offers so much promise and potential. When people complain about land grab, about large investors coming in and going out, I say, why do we complain? If somebody comes to your place and asks to rent a room in your house, and instead, because of the money they are giving to you, you decide to rent out your bedroom, and then tomorrow you complain to your neighbor, or they see you sleeping on the veranda, whom are you going to complain to? Come on, let's face it. We should not blame ourselves for our mistakes, for our greed and stupidity. And so this dividend of our youth has the potential of yielding great things for Africa. But first, we must invest, now and today. We have to create the space for young people to be able to demonstrate their capacities and their abilities, so that they can take their energy into creative and innovative things. They can generate, let them experience, let them make mistakes. How will they learn to make mistakes and learn from it if they're not free, if they're not given the opportunities? And that's what DG Sanginga is doing, only giving you opportunities with grants. But if you want to prosper, you must take loans. But if they are able to take advantage of these opportunities, they will generate wealth, they will create jobs, and they will bring about stability in their communities. And hopefully, they will also create new industrial parks. When you think about Silicon Valley, how did it start? Young entrepreneurs taking risks. So we need such similar intellectual revolution by young Africans with innovations that place sustainable food systems at the heart of a new business model. I believe that our young people, and I believe that agriculture in Africa offers a bright future for many of them, but not only agriculture, and not only agribusiness. You may say to yourselves that today the world is more difficult than it was before. I say no. Technology and communications brings everything to our doorsteps. But I can assure you that today you have opportunities that I did not have 40 years ago. Just think of what you can do with IT, with digital technology, sitting in one room. You can connect the world. You can begin businesses. You can even trade information. You can feed information to farmers on your iPhone. You can do your banking. You can do your transactions with IT. Come on, 40 years ago, if I wrote to Dr. Sanginga, it will take 40 days for him to get it. Today, you get it in less than 4 seconds. You get a reply. So look at the challenges that seem so tremendously difficult to tackle today as opportunities. Opportunities always come with challenges, because that's the only way you can be motivated to look for solutions. And if you look at Africa's economic landscape, people are getting richer. The middle class is growing. Tastes are changing. People are looking for quality foods. They're looking for quality time. And they're looking for providers. That's where your opportunity is. It's part of the demographic dividend of Africa. Don't wait for outsiders to come to your doorsteps and take your bedroom from you. This is your chance. We have all that it takes, as I said. Abundance of rich, fertile soil, sunshine, rainfall, and most of all, energetic and young population. Now let me give you one statistic and ask yourself, look at Africa's land. 25% of Africa, of the world's arable land is in Africa, 25%. But it only generates 10% of the world agricultural output. On top of that, we are importing $35 billion of food every day. Nigeria, $6 billion of food every day. That is today. By 2025, we're looking at $100 billion import bill. Let me tell you what that means. It's not only that we are spending money, wasting money. What is more important for me is that we are paying somebody else, or some people in Europe, in the Americas, to produce food. We are wasting, we are throwing away $35 billion. Nigeria, $6 billion every year is what we are giving to some people in some parts of the world to create jobs for them when we have almost 40% youth unemployment, putting money in their pockets when we have people going to bed hungry in this country, in this continent. Does it make sense? But we are part of it. We, the consumers, we want something imported from France, from the US, from Brazil. We want chicken that comes from Brazil, and is the worst chicken that you can ever buy in the market. I know it. We want to drink red wine. A Frenchman never exports the best wine of his country. He drinks it in France. So I can assure you, what you buy in your country is not the best wines. But I know it's easy to say, go into agriculture. What about the infrastructure? The roads? Just roads alone. The whole debate that you had about producers and processors, I was waiting for somebody, one of you, to say something, to talk about waste. What is the simplest waste? What is the simplest approach to waste control, food loss control? Storage. Simple storage. The producer, you should say, I don't care. I'm going to improve my storage capacity. I'm going to have cold rooms instead. And I will extend the life of my produce by another 2 weeks to 2 months. And when you come to me, because the produce is no longer in the market, because harvest season is over, you come to me, I'll sell to you at a higher price. That's all. I've just given you a business idea. So I'm asking you, please, help us. Because if we do not give you young people the opportunities, infrastructure, finance, social services, and the rest of them, Africa's demographic dividend will become Africa's demographic disaster. Why am I saying this? Because youth unemployment in Africa is the highest also. In sub-Saharan Africa, employment is very low. About 60% of our youth come out of school undereducated. That is the problem. This graph gives you the figures. 60% undereducated. What does that mean? Educational systems today are not what they were 40 years ago. And so people are not qualified for jobs. You are not going to be employed. Because what you have done in school, universities, is to read book. But you have gained no experience. And nobody wants to waste money. The old education system that when you left school, you were already prepared for a profession doesn't exist anymore. We have in sub-Saharan Africa over 300 million young people looking for work. They're looking for employment. And by 2015, that figure will be exactly about 350 million. 200 million of these people are coming from rural areas. Now, do you think that governments and companies are going to be able to absorb 200 million rural youth looking for jobs? No. Our population is also going to grow, and we're going to have difficulty absorbing these 200 million because there'll be no jobs. It is not realistic, in any case, to expect governments to create jobs. That's the mistake we made. We finish school, you're looking for a job to be absorbed by a ministry or a corporation. Well, agriculture is a rural business. But you can also have agriculture, successful agriculture, feeds the urban population. Foods do not grow in cities, in spite of vertical agriculture and peri-urban agriculture. Most of the food, 90-some%, will still be produced in rural areas. But here's the question. How many of you will like or will willingly choose to live in a village where there's no electricity, where there's no running water, where there's no internet? A village just outside of Ibadan. Who will take the risk? When it rains, you are stuck. There's no running water. And then there are no clinics or banks or financial institutions. How many of you, young people, would prefer to live in such a village? I don't see any hands. So how can we, government and institutions, expect the new millennials to opt for agriculture when all they see are things like this that you have on the screen? That's their recreation. This is their meeting hall, their town hall, in some village, somewhere. But we need to invest in rural transformation. Now, what I mean by rural transformation? A transformation that is inclusive, that creates opportunities for young people to build their homes, have the basic necessities, a refrigerator, a gas cooker, electricity, and schools for their children to go to school. Make it attractive so that young people have a choice where they live, not that they're compelled to look for better lives in the urban areas. And what happens? Yes, it is true that Africa's cities are getting explosive. African cities are bulging, population increase. But what is happening in these urban areas is not real population growth, it's the slums. The slums are getting more populated. And that's where you find a breeding ground for most of these desperate and frustrated youth who end up being highly susceptible to rhetoric of extremism. And they end up in places like Boko Haram, or they try to escape and migrate. Half of them die in the Mediterranean, or they dry up in the Sahara, and they never make it to Europe. Yes, some say, but Dr. Kanayo, your arguments don't make sense. The fastest growing economies in the world, most of them are African countries. Some say of the 12 fastest growing countries in the world, 7 or 8 of them are African countries. Some say of the fastest 20, whatever it is, fastest growing 20 countries in the world, half of them are in Africa. High GDP growth rates until 2014, when oil prices began to crash. Well, that is true. But GDP growth is not necessarily a measure of social development. It is economic growth, yes, but it is not inclusive. These economies, they grew on the basis of the extractive industries and commodity prices. They have crashed. And so what is happening? There's a recession. Nigeria and South Africa, the two largest economies, are going through a contraction of their economies. And it's not yet the end. Worse is yet to come. So, what does that tell us? If we want to invest in the areas that will make our continent sustainable, we have to invest in agriculture. Extractive industries have not transformed our nations. Yes, they have generated wealth and enriched the pockets of a few people, leaving the majority destitute and poor. We need to offer our young women and men opportunities to build their lives and realize their dreams in rural areas. I believe it can be done. It must be done. But the change has to come from within, not from outside. And that is the mistake we always make. As I said in one of the videos, development is not something that you can do or for somebody or to somebody else. Nobody, no foreign investments will develop you. You have to develop yourself. It must start from inside, from the leadership at the highest political level, institutions. Only then can that transformation or development be sustainable. As I've said, you are all here in agriculture. You know it very well. Every tree, every seed has to be fully anchored in the soil. Its roots must be anchored in the soil where it is sown for it to be able to use the energies of sunlight that come from outside. There's no other way. So we must invest. Development is an intrinsic process. And our development must be here in Africa by Africans for Africans. There's no other way. This is where IITA comes in. This is where IITA IFAD partnership is very crucial. Because we can invest and work as partners. But let me be clear about this. This development cannot be done in Rome or in Washington. It will not spring from conferences in Rio or in Beijing or in London, in Paris or in Bonn. It will not arise from meetings and summits in countries outside of this continent where our leaders troop like idiots and fools to attend. I feel humiliated because they go to these meetings to be told how Africa should develop. Think about it. After 55, 60 years of independence, call a meeting. 40 heads of state attended TICAD 6 in Nairobi, Japan International Cooperation for Africa's Development. 40. The next week, the AGRF, Africa Green Revolution Forum, 4 heads of state, 2 current heads of state, 2 ex-heads of state attended. Japan promised $30 billion of aid assistance to Africa, 20 billion investments. Our heads of state, our leaders were very happy. It was a success story. I bet you organize a summit meeting here at IITA and tell me how many of them will come. It is very humiliating because we haven't learned. As it is said, we still have colonial mentality. My last call on this, and I will make it, Africa's transformation must begin and end here on our own African soil. It must be led by our own people, but every one of us here today has a role to play, no matter how small it may seem. This also extends to African research institutions. As a research scientist, myself, of course, you expect me to speak in favor of research and the needs of why we should invest in research. I'll be preaching to the converted. We're all here converted scientists or the other researchers. But why, yes, we still need to do research, we should be asking ourselves, what kind of new and cutting-edge technology do we need in Africa? Not just to do research for the sake of publications. We should be asking ourselves, what kind of research? We know it, that our research today in Africa is performing significantly below its potential. If you ask me, just check the literature. Yields today are half what they used to be in 1970. For the simple fact that our soils are depleted and farmers are not using fertilizers. So yields are half what they're supposed to be today because of that. The farmers do not use basic inputs. I know there's a call for us to use biotechnology. Yes, I support biotechnology. There are some who argue that GMOs are what we need to go for. I say, yes, GMOs are necessary when the conditions are the only ones that call for them, like extreme drought situations, where you need drought, highly tolerant drought maize. But ask ourselves, the African farmer, on the average, applies 10 to 13 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare. Brazil, 190 kilograms. India, 140 kilograms per hectare. Do our farmers use improved seeds, hybrids? How many of them? We still use traditional varieties. What about irrigation? Less than 5% of our land is irrigated. India, 43%. Brazil, almost 60%. So the basic technologies that we have, our farmers who produce over 80% of what we consume do not use them. So what kind of research do we need? What kind of policies do we need to support farmers? Why would a farmer want to grow a high-yielding crop variety when he knows or she knows that at the end of the harvest, there'll be too much maize in the market and prices will fall? That's what happens. Because there's no price guarantee. There's no consistency in policies. So they do it 1 year, 2 years, the third year they don't. So where is the problem? It's as simple as ABC. We need the leadership that knows how to do this thing. Dr. Adeshina was Minister for Agriculture for less than 4 years. You all know what he did. I do not know any other Minister of Agriculture that did so much for this country like he did. Now let me try and see if I can get to the closure of my of this seminar. You read in many publications of today, from the World Bank, from the African Bank, from my institution, IFAD, that Africa's future is bright in its agricultural sector. In fact, the World Bank recently described African agriculture as highly dependent on a successful smallholder agriculture, and said the largest private sector group that invests in agriculture are small producers. The largest private sector group that invests in agriculture are small producers. That means a lot. So, farmers are also private sector. But as a group, and that is something that you must learn as you go on as agripreneurs, perhaps you can do it alone by yourself and become a Dangote. But I tell you, when you get together and you aggregate yourselves into cooperatives, into farmers groups, into women's associations, you have a better chance of success. Aggregation makes you more credible. Have your institutional framework that you operate, institutional governance structure, be registered as a recognized institution, company, or association. Alone by yourselves, it may not be easy. But the one thing that you need as you get towards forming yourselves, very essential, 2 words: trust and respect. If you don't have them, you will never succeed as a group. As I mentioned earlier, when I retire, I intend to devote the rest of my energies that I have to working with young people, to motivate, to mentor, to support. For the simple fact that I believe that our future rests in their hands. It is not acceptable when we look back to the 60s and 70s, a continent that was the hope for the future of mankind. Our country, West Africa alone, we exported cocoa, oil palm. Nigeria, bales and bales of cotton, groundnut pyramids in Kano, rice from Abakaliki, and you name it. Timber floating, being cured for export. What happened? 30, 40 years later, countries like Brazil, that only 35 to 40 years ago was dependent on food aid. India was described as a hopeless case. 1 million Chinese died from famine, from hunger. Africa was not a case in the news. In fact, even South Korea, we sent aid, assistance, both human and financial resources to South Korea after the war in Korea. Today, we receive aid from India, from China, from Brazil, from Korea. What happened? Where did we go wrong? But we don't have to bemoan the past. That is why I say to you, the future is yours. If those countries could do it, their leaders of today were the youth of their days, of 30 to 40 years ago. And they said, no, this cannot be. They rejected the legacy of shame, corruption that was handed to them by their parents and grandparents. And they said, we must change it. So that's what you must do. If not for yourself, for your children and your grandchildren. It's imperative that Africa develops its agricultural sector. Minerals and wealth from the extractive industries has not generated public goods for the populations. It did not translate into job creation. Economic growth and social development did not take place broadly. A few people got rich. Yes, this country and others, Gabon, Angola, became rich on oil. But tell me, did oil feed anybody? Did anybody here eat money from oil? No. Oil has not fed Nigerians because you cannot eat crude oil. Dr. Adeshina will tell you the same thing. So let us reverse decades of neglect of African agriculture. It must be reversed. Because if we actually abandon agriculture, we abandon our future. We have seen it. And there's a lot of potential. Our population is growing and is getting richer. Yes, the middle class is expanding in spite of it. And the demand for quality food is increasing. You don't have to carry the hoe to be in the business of food production. There are many ways of getting engaged. Simple buying and processing, buying and repackaging. Buy the fruits before they begin to rot on the roadside. Devise storage mechanisms, simple storage mechanisms. 2 weeks later, I can tell you, you can take your fruits to ShopRite and sell them at a higher price. And that's how you start. Don't think you will make $1 million overnight. That's our problem. We want to be rich tomorrow. So the prospects for agriculture to take back its position in Africa's development is now. It's brighter for Africa, it's brighter for all of us. As I said, urbanization is getting very fast. Who do you think is going to feed them? Our import bill is going to grow to $100 billion by 2025. That's less than 10 years from now. Why? Because if we are not able to produce enough food locally, we are forced to import them, creating more jobs and giving our wealth to others. Doesn't it make sense that this should be reversed? What greater opportunity do you think you can? This is your chance. Go and get it. And as an indication that things are changing a little bit, at least within West Africa, countries are beginning to trade. There are still trade barriers, such as both taxes, custom taxes, tariff and non-tariff taxes. Between Lagos and Cotonou, you have about 10 different places you stop. You have to give, what have you brought for me today, sir? So Chad exports meat to Nigeria, sesame to Sudan, even Benin Republic exports vegetables to Ghana, to Nigeria, and to Togo. And Niger exports a lot of onions to all of West Africa. So there are trade opportunities. People say, well, because of these trade barriers, so we're not able to sell our things to our neighbors. What about our local domestic markets? If you want to buy ketchup, I don't think many of you know what tomapep is anyway. If you want to buy ketchup, you have to produce the tomato. So why don't you buy tomato that is produced locally, transformed into your own tomato paste locally, and not necessarily ketchup that is made by Heinz? I know those who go to this, oh no, this is not made by Heinz. So they won't buy it. It's local made. And I bet you they're probably buying a produce that is made in China, where the quality standards are not the same as Heinz itself in Europe. I believe there are some signs of improvement in some countries. In Central Africa, for example, between Rwanda and the Republic of Congo, as much as you may not know it, where there are now free trade, free border, seamless border between the two countries. But I think one of the greatest obstacles to our young people going into agriculture is one of perception. They think farming is old-fashioned. But I'm so happy about the IITA Youth Agripreneurs Program, because you have debunked this false idea that farming is a poor man's job. When you are able to fall off the tree, as I've said, because you are still hanging on the tree, which is IITA, and every mature fruit must fall off from its mother plant for it to be able to grow. So as long as you hang on this tree, you will never grow. That's the problem. So for you to develop and grow, you must get to the point where you have your self-confidence to be able to establish yourself as independent entities. So do not stretch this period of incubation forever and bask in this protection of this mother tree that is IITA. Because until you break away, fall off the tree, and have your roots anchored in the soil somewhere, you shall never blossom. So farming is a business. And let me give you a couple of examples where we at IFAD have worked with a lot of countries and young people so that you know what I'm saying is real. A few years ago, we started at IFAD to put some emphasis on young people and agriculture. When I spoke about it in 2010, 2011, my colleagues said, he has come again. What are we going to, just like your board, what is youth in agriculture? Well, today, I don't have to say, actually, half of the grants that we went through in September were youth-related grants. In Egypt, we started with a project. Young graduates, jobless. And this project, first of all, rehabilitated desert land. That was all the government could give to them. Give them large piece of desert land. So the first thing we did was to rehabilitate this desert land and then improve production. So it was reclaimed. So it's basically a reclaimed desert. And then help them to improve their production, connected them with markets. And these are all graduates. And today, we helped 110,000 unemployed graduates to build a future in agriculture. What do? Surprisingly enough, they're now exporting vegetables and fruits to Europe, particularly to Heinz, and farm gate prices have risen by about 1/3. In neighboring Benin here, Republic of Benin, we started the financial services program because young people and rural people had difficulties accessing financing institutions. So we started what we call the Rural Finance Institution Project in Benin. And here we were able to help financial service associations in more than 190 villages. In fact, as a result of this project, the Ministry of Finance created a sub-ministry on rural finance. So we're able to actually affect national policies. So this rural finance created a decree, or promulgated a decree, where every village must have at least one rural finance per community, one rural finance institution per community. A very good story from Nigeria. Asuko is familiar with it. One of the projects we are supporting in the Niger Delta program, is it? 9 Niger Delta states. This is a young man called Kingsley. Kingsley was a young man who benefited from a grant. He graduated now from a grant and is hoping to get his first loan very soon. And what is he doing? Beehives, honey. And he wrote to me a couple of weeks ago, basically thanking me and IFAD for the help that we gave to him. And he was able to add additional 400 beehives. But the most significant thing that Kingsley has done, his bee production, his honey, has now received certification for export to the EU. This is to say that we don't just talk about youth employment, youth entrepreneurship. We try to do it by showing you that you can do it, supporting you. And of course, you all know that IFAD has supported a lot of youth initiatives. You have CORI, C-O-R-I, creating opportunities for rural youth in West and Central Africa, which I understand is having some problems. But the Global Youth Innovation Network, GIN, also was established by IFAD support. Last March, you had your, meeting in Dakar, so last March. And I think also you have another thing, an crop of this is Yalesi or something, youth something, that took place also. In that Dakar meeting, you had about 300 youth. Now, what's fascinating, I took note of this. Last week, as I was signing the last papers before I left the office, there was actually one grant for GIN for them to help young rural entrepreneurs in Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. Guess how much the grant is? $1 million. They have made their mark. They were able to do a proposal that was able to receive vetting by IFAD through our system for them to receive a grant of $1 million. And I'm pretty sure that can go a long way. So what must be done? What I just shared with you are some steps. It's just the beginning. But rural transformation cannot be done by one individual alone. An investment in rural transformation and structural transformation is a choice that must be done by governments. And governments must invest. It means investing in transforming the rural space so that it becomes acceptable and livable, becomes vibrant, rural towns, providing the same amenities that you and I would like to have here in Ibadan, in Lagos, or any of the capitals of this country. Rural towns that offer young people opportunities to grow, electricity, running water, services, schools, clinics, financial services. These are not difficult to do when you put it along a long projected program. The problem is that our ministers, our governments in Africa think only 2 to 4 year spans. By the second year, they're thinking of the election, which is coming 2 years. And so there's nothing. But if we can plan 25 years, when Mao Zedong told his whatever they call the cabinet, when he was alive, he asked them, where do you see China in 50 years? They said, this old man, what is wrong with you? You don't even have 5 years to go, you're thinking of 50-year plan. He said, aren't you thinking of your children and your grandchildren? That was in the 70s and 80s. Look at China today. Look at China today. China did not just mushroom overnight. It took time, nurturing, people with ambition, with commitment, with foresight, and dedication to their own people. This is the time for government to step up. It calls for a partnership, government, the public sector, the private sector, civil society, young people working together. We must invest in people, and we must invest in projects. Projects are made by people, and people benefit from projects. So when we invest in building a road, we must know we are building the road for people. When we invest in putting a school in a place, we must know the school is for people. People must be at the center of our investment, no matter where or what we do. And this is something that is central to development, because it is people that develop. A city, a town, a country does not develop by itself. The people develop to transform their place, their abodes. So it's up to government to create what I said, a conducive climate for entrepreneurs. The private sector must play its own role, and so must civil society, and young people themselves must not sit passively and wait for governments to give them jobs. So we need youth with conviction, determination to fight for good governance and social progress. Young people who can build their own communities, constructively challenge their elders and leaders when they are wrong. So let me issue one more challenge to Africa's youth. Do not sit at home waiting for government or your parents or your uncles and your aunts to find you work and to pave your way. When you see an opportunity, take it. Every challenge is an opportunity. Let me conclude. I'll share with you a saying that I have shared with many others in the past. It's an African saying. When you go to the stream to fetch water with your bucket, the water that you collect is your bucket of water. It's nobody else's bucket of water. Life will always give you what you deserve, not just what you want. Nothing more, nothing less. But first, remember, to get your bucket of water, you must work with your 2 feet, with your bucket in your hand. When you get to the stream, you must then bend down because the water will not come to your bucket unless you bend down. These are stages in life. Walking to the stream is not always easy. There's not only one road. There are many roads. There are many paths to the stream. I tell you, I was not born in a healthy family. My father was not a businessman with a lot of money. He was just an ordinary school teacher, traveling from town to town, sometimes across the then western region, transferred from Kwale to Owo, and to report the next Monday, as they did in those days. And I was never born, when I was born 70 years ago, I was not born to become head of a United Nations agency. My father, of course, said, I have to do medicine, like every father. You have to be a doctor. I wanted to do economics. He said, no, that would not feed you. So, although he was not a diplomat or a politician, he was head of the family. But then, life was not that easy for those days. My life was interrupted by the Biafran War for 3 years. And I thought I would never get to the stream to get my own bucket of water. Many things happened. I finally went to college in Ibadan, and many other things happened. But I believe I finally got to the stream. And I can assure you, my bucket is not empty. And that is why I am committed, as I said, for those of us who have been fortunate in life, to have lived a fully gratifying life. We have a responsibility to share that water with those who come after us. And I'm confident that we will do that by helping younger generations reach this stream. Because when they do, they will repay us by rejuvenating Africa's agricultural sector and helping Africa to take its place as a leader, not only feeding Africans, but also feeding the rest of the world. You can do it. Go for it.
Hello, agripreneurs. I want us to sustain this momentum. We'll have to rejuvenate another fundamental tribosa for this presentation. Please, after the count of 2, we should produce a very viable 3 fundamental gosa. 1, 2, go! Gosa! Gosa! Gosa!
Mr. President,